Rain pelted against the Navy base parking lot, the kind that soaked through uniforms and pride alike. A black sedan rolled to a stop near the parade grounds, its engine humming low under the grey sky. From it stepped a man who seemed ordinary at first glance. Civilian jacket, worn boots, and a faint tiredness behind his calm eyes. His hands were rough, calloused by years that had known war and loss. He was early, as he always was, holding his son's small hand, leading him toward the open courtyard where officers were gathering for a recruitment event. The boy, no older than 9, tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad, are they all soldiers like you were?" The man smiled softly but said nothing. He adjusted the boy's jacket and kept walking. His silence carried weight, the kind that wasn't pride but restraint. He didn't wear medals or ribbons anymore, though somewhere, folded in a wooden box at home, they still gleamed. At the center of the crowd stood Admiral Reeves, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, with the confidence of a man who had commanded oceans. His laughter echoed across the courtyard, crisp and loud. Around him, junior officers chuckled dutifully. When he spotted the man and the child approaching, curiosity flickered in his cold blue eyes. "Another civilian tagging along," Reeves murmured, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You lost, buddy. This area's for personnel and families." The single dad paused, letting his son's hand slip free. His tone remained even, polite. "Just waiting for someone." The Admiral's grin sharpened. "Waiting, huh? Maybe I should ask your rank while we're at it." He chuckled, clearly amused by his own arrogance. "What are you, a janitor? Contractor?" Laughter rippled through the group. A few younger sailors glanced away, uncomfortable but silent. The man said nothing. He only looked at his son, who now stood confused, sensing something was wrong. The wind cut through the courtyard. Flags snapped in the distance. The quiet stretched, heavy and unbearable. Then, from behind the Admiral, a voice called out sharply, "Admiral Reeves, with respect, that man's no civilian." Every head turned. A colonel approached, rain dripping from his cap, eyes fixed on the stranger. He stopped 2 steps away, his expression hard to read, a strange mix of disbelief and reverence. "Sir," the colonel said quietly, "that's Major General Nathan Cole." The air froze. Reeves blinked once, twice, as though the name were an impossible echo. The man, the single dad standing quietly in the rain, gave a faint nod, eyes calm, almost apologetic. "Major General," Reeves repeated, his voice cracking, "but Cole raised a hand gently, silencing him. "It's fine. I'm here for my son's school visit, not for ceremony." The Admiral's posture stiffened, his grin dissolving into something brittle. The sailors shifted uneasily. The same officers who had laughed now stared at the ground. For a long, tense moment, no one spoke. The rain fell harder, washing the smugness from every face. Cole crouched beside his son, helping him tie a loose shoelace, his movements patient and unhurried. The colonel stood at attention beside him, refusing to move. The boy looked up. "Dad, are you famous?" Cole's smile was weary but kind. "No, son, just someone who did his duty." The Admiral's throat tightened. He remembered the name now, a decorated leader, the youngest general to command overseas, a man who had vanished quietly after his wife's death, refusing promotion or attention. The single father everyone pitied in the neighborhood. That was him. Reeves stepped forward, his voice subdued. "General Cole, I didn't realize you weren't supposed to," Cole replied softly. "Respect doesn't depend on what someone wears." The words struck like a rifle report. Simple, quiet, true. The Admiral lowered his head slightly, the smallest, rarest gesture of humility. In the silence that followed, the storm seemed to fade. The boy reached for his father's hand again, and together they began walking toward the school building. Cole didn't look back. He didn't need to. Every man behind him knew they'd just witnessed something far greater than rank. The quiet authority of a leader who no longer needed a uniform to command respect. As they disappeared into the gray mist, Reeves stood motionless, the taste of regret heavy in his mouth. He had spent his life commanding power, but for the first time he understood what true power looked like. Not in medals or salutes, but in restraint, integrity, and the courage to walk away. And somewhere deep in his chest, shame and admiration collided, leaving him hollow and changed. The next morning, the sun broke through a pale haze, spilling gold over the naval compound, as if trying to cleanse the memory of what had happened. Yet the unease lingered like smoke after gunfire. Admiral Reeves sat in his office, motionless, the silence pressing against him harder than any reprimand ever could. The coffee on his desk had gone cold. His reflection in the glass window stared back, proud, rigid, and suddenly uncertain. He'd spent decades commanding men who followed orders without question. But the image of that quiet man in the rain would not leave him. A single dad, dressed in plain clothes, humbling an admiral without anger, without threat. Just by existing. Reeves had always believed leadership meant authority, but Major General Nathan Cole had shattered that illusion with a single look. Across the base, word had spread in whispers. Some said Reeves had mocked a legend. Others claimed the general had forgiven him, with a grace that felt unbearable. The truth, though, was quieter than gossip. It was the kind of truth that sat in the gut and refused to move. Reeves rubbed his temples. He could still hear Cole's words echoing. Respect doesn't depend on what someone wears. He had spent years teaching young officers the code of dignity, discipline, and honor. And yet, he had failed to practice it when it mattered most. Later that afternoon, Reeves walked out of his office, his steps heavy with purpose. The corridors of command, once his kingdom, now felt narrow and suffocating. Sailors saluted as he passed, but their eyes didn't carry admiration. They carried memory. He drove through the city, past the gates, to the edge of a quiet suburb where the streets grew still and ordinary. The GPS guided him to a modest house. White fence, a small swing in the yard, and the faint sound of a child's laughter drifting from within. Reeves hesitated at the gate, his breath caught between pride and remorse. The door opened before he could knock. Nathan Cole stood there, in a grey sweatshirt and jeans, a dish towel over his shoulder. No uniform, no rank, just a man at home. "Admiral," Cole said calmly, a hint of surprise in his tone. Reeves straightened instinctively. "General, I preferred to apologize." Cole studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled faintly of coffee and old books. Family photos lined the hallway, a younger Cole in uniform beside a woman with bright eyes, the kind of woman who smiled with her whole being. Reeves noticed her absence in the present tense of the house. No trace of her voice, only the stillness she had left behind. Cole motioned toward a chair. "You don't owe me anything, Admiral." Reeves shook his head. "No, I do. I disrespected a man who's given more to this country than I could ever dream. I mocked a father in front of his son. I forgot the very thing I swore to uphold." Cole remained silent. Silence was his way, patient, grounded, impenetrable. He let others unravel in it. After a long pause, he said quietly, "You didn't disrespect a general. You disrespected a man you thought was beneath you. That's a habit we all have to fight, in uniform or out." Reeves looked up, the words cutting deep. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you carry that calm after everything you've seen?" Cole leaned back, his gaze distant. "Because I lost everything that made anger worth holding. My wife died while I was overseas. I was chasing honor while she was fighting cancer alone. When I came back, I learned that medals rust faster than memories. Since then, I've only fought one battle, to be a father worth my son's respect." The Admiral's chest tightened. He had medals too, rows of them, and yet they suddenly felt weightless. "You stepped away from command because of that." "I stepped away," Cole said softly, "because I realized I'd rather command one heart honestly than 1,000 men blindly." Outside, the wind brushed the trees, carrying the faint squeak of the swing in the yard. Reeves felt something collapse inside him, the image of himself as a man who had everything figured out. For years he had judged others by posture, tone, and uniform, mistaking compliance for respect. He set his cap on the table, staring at it like a relic. "General, if you'd let me, I'd like to invite you back. The Navy still needs men like you. Men who can remind us what honor really looks like. Cole gave a faint, almost sorrowful smile. Honor doesn't live in commands, Admiral. It lives in how we treat the powerless. If your men can learn that without me, then the Navy doesn't need a general, it needs better listeners. Reeves nodded slowly, the truth heavy but cleansing. He stood, extending his hand. Cole shook it firmly. No rank between them now, no audience, just two men acknowledging something sacred. As Reeves turned to leave, he glanced once more at the photograph on the shelf. The smiling woman beside the uniformed man, and a young boy clutching his father's finger. He understood now why the general had seemed so peaceful in the rain. He wasn't fighting for status anymore. He was protecting what truly mattered. When the Admiral stepped outside, the late afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, glinting off his car's windshield. He took a long breath, feeling the world slow. He hadn't been humiliated by Cole. He had been taught, quietly, without cruelty. Some lessons, he realized, were given not by shouting, but by example, and they branded deeper than any scar. Days turned into weeks, but Admiral Reeves couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. The world around him carried on, drills, briefings, salutes, but inside, something had changed. His authority felt hollow, stripped of the blind certainty he once wore like armor. Every time he looked at a sailor, he wondered if behind that uniform was a story he'd never cared enough to hear. He began arriving earlier than usual, walking the base before dawn, when the mist still clung to the air and the scent of salt and oil drifted from the harbor. The silence gave him time to think, time to replay the rain-soaked afternoon when arrogance met grace and lost. He had faced enemy fire before, but nothing had disarmed him like the calm in Nathan Cole's eyes. That calm wasn't weakness. It was strength, the kind born of pain, discipline, and loss. Reeves found himself questioning not just his leadership, but his very purpose. One morning, during inspection, a young recruit dropped his rifle during formation. The metallic clang echoed like a gunshot. The line froze. Old Reeves, the man from a month ago, would have barked until the air turned to ash. But now, he just looked at the trembling boy, barely 20, his knuckles white with fear. Reeves knelt, picked up the rifle, and handed it back quietly. "Don't apologize for being nervous," he said, his voice low but steady. "Just remember who you carry it for." The recruit blinked, speechless. Something in the Admiral's tone, not authority but humanity, steadied him. The rest of the line stood taller. By evening, whispers spread again. The Admiral had changed. He listened now. He spoke less, but when he did, it carried weight. Still, change rarely comes without resistance. A week later, during a high-level meeting, Vice Admiral Crowe, a man known for his sharp tongue and sharper ego, laughed during a discussion about morale. "Don't tell me you're going soft, Reeves," he scoffed. "You start coddling them, they'll forget who's in charge." Reeves met his gaze across the table. "If a man respects you only out of fear," he said quietly, "then you've never led him. You've only controlled him." The room fell silent. Crowe smirked, but it was hollow. Everyone knew Reeves meant every word. After the meeting, Reeves stood by the window, staring at the ocean stretching endlessly beyond the docks. He thought about Cole, not the rank, not the legend, but the man who'd chosen love over command. The man who had once stood in this very courtyard and faced ridicule without raising his voice. Later that week, Reeves attended a ceremony at the Naval Academy. Cadets in crisp uniforms lined the field, their parents beaming from the stands. The event felt familiar. Pride, applause, the metallic shine of medals under sunlight. But his eyes kept scanning the crowd. He didn't know why until he saw him. Nathan Cole stood near the edge of the bleachers, wearing a simple jacket again, his son seated beside him, legs swinging with impatience. The boy spotted Reeves first and waved. Cole looked up, surprised but smiling faintly. Reeves approached, his posture less rigid now, his voice quieter than the drums rolling across the field. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. Cole nodded. "My son wanted to watch the cadets. Says he wants to be one someday." Reeves glanced at the boy. "He'll make a good one. He already has the right example." The boy grinned, oblivious to the storm of emotion beneath their words. Cole studied Reeves for a moment. "You've changed," he said simply. Reeves exhaled. "You did that to me." Cole shook his head. "No, you did it to yourself. I just showed you what it looks like." The ceremony began, the anthem rising, the flag climbing skyward. Both men stood side by side, hand over heart, eyes fixed on the horizon. For the first time, Reeves didn't feel superior. He felt equal, part of something larger than his name or his stars. Afterward, when the crowd thinned, Cole turned to leave, but Reeves stopped him. "You were right, you know," he said. "About respect. About listening." Cole's eyes softened. "It's not about being right, Admiral. It's about being aware." Reeves nodded slowly. "I want to be better at that." "Then start with the men who don't expect it," Cole said. "They're the ones who need it most." The words lingered as Cole and his son walked away through the fading sunlight. Reeves watched until they disappeared beyond the gates, swallowed by the orange glow of evening. That night, alone in his office, Reeves wrote a memo to every commanding officer under his authority. It wasn't filled with orders or threats, but a quiet directive, a reminder of humility. True leadership is not measured by how loudly you command, but by how quietly you inspire. Wear your rank as lightly as your humanity allows. He signed it, folded it, and placed it on his desk. For once, it didn't feel like a report. It felt like a confession. Outside, the moon climbed over the bay, reflecting off the water like a silent salute. Somewhere out there, Nathan Cole was probably reading his son a bedtime story, his medals tucked away in a drawer, his past buried under peace. And for the first time in years, Admiral Reeves felt something rare. Not pride, not authority, but clarity. He wasn't done learning yet. Years slipped quietly through the folds of duty and time. Seasons turned, commands changed, and Admiral Reeves grew older. Not weaker, but wiser in the kind of way that comes only through humility. The base he once ruled with fear had transformed. The air felt lighter. Laughter no longer vanished when he entered a room. Sailors greeted him now not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They'd seen the difference. The way he listened, the way he spoke to the lowest ranks with the same respect he gave to general. Reeves had built warships and strategies, but this was the first time he had built something lasting, trust. And yet, the face of one man never left him, Nathan Cole. It had been nearly 4 years since that rainy afternoon, since the moment a single father reminded an admiral what leadership truly meant. Cole had kept his promise to stay away from the spotlight. No public appearances, no ceremonies. He had chosen peace. But fate, like the sea, always circles back. One spring morning, Reeves received a letter stamped with the insignia of the Department of Defense. The handwriting was steady, deliberate, the kind of penmanship taught in military schools long before digital screens replaced ink. It was from Nathan Cole's son. "Admiral Reeves, my name is Jacob Cole. I don't know if you remember me, but you met me when I was 9. My father passed away 2 weeks ago. He spoke of you often, said you understood something most men never do. We're holding a small service next Saturday." "We?" He said once that a salute from an honest man means more than 1,000 medals. I think he meant you, Jacob. Reeves read the letter twice before setting it down. The edges trembled slightly in his fingers. He had faced storms, wars, and political battles, but nothing had ever felt as heavy as that folded paper. That Saturday, beneath a quiet sky streaked with early sunlight, Reeves arrived at the small cemetery tucked between 2 oak trees. No ceremony, no uniforms, just family, a few neighbors, and silence. Jacob stood by a modest headstone, older now, tall and composed, the reflection of his father's quiet strength. When he saw Reeves approach, he straightened instinctively, then hesitated, unsure how to greet a man of such stature. Reeves broke the tension first. "You've grown," he said softly. "Your father would have been proud." Jacob smiled faintly. "He talked about you sometimes. Said you learned something from him that day." Reeves nodded. "I did, and I've been learning ever since." They stood together as the wind rustled through the grass, carrying the distant cry of a gull. Reeves looked at the grave. Nathan Cole, Major General, father, servant of peace. No grand epitaph, just truth. He removed his cap and held it over his heart. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, with a trembling hand, he lifted his palm in salute, slow, deliberate, perfect. Not the salute of an admiral to a subordinate, but of one man to another. When he lowered his hand, Jacob's eyes glistened. "He always said respect isn't about rank," he whispered. Reeves smiled faintly. "Your father was right. He always was." After the service, Jacob handed him a small box wrapped in worn cloth. "He wanted you to have this," he said. Inside was a single medal, tarnished around the edges but still gleaming faintly in the sunlight. Reeves recognized it immediately. The Distinguished Service Cross. Beneath it lay a folded note in Cole's handwriting. "To the man who learned that leadership is quiet. If you ever doubt yourself again, remember the rain." Reeves closed the box gently, the weight of it grounding him in something sacred. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely audible. When he returned to his car, he didn't start the engine right away. He sat there, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sky met the earth, where duty met humanity. He thought of that first day, the laughter, the arrogance, the lesson that had humbled him. He realized now that Cole hadn't just taught him to lead differently. He had taught him to live differently. Months later, during the Navy's Leadership Summit, Reeves took the stage for what would be his final address before retirement. The hall was filled with uniforms, polished boots, and the restless energy of youth. Men and women who still believed rank was power. He spoke quietly, without theatrics. "I've commanded ships, fleets, and men braver than I'll ever be," he began. "But I stand here today because a single father once reminded me that true command begins when you put your ego aside. That day I saw a man who had every right to demand respect, and he asked for none. I disrespected him publicly. He corrected me privately, not with anger, but with grace. That man was Major General Nathan Cole." The room was silent, not out of discipline, but reverence. "He taught me," Reeves continued, "that uniforms fade, ranks change, and medals tarnish. But the way we treat people, that lasts forever. If you want to lead, start by listening. If you want to be honored, start by humbling yourself." He paused, scanning the faces before him. Young, eager, unaware they were living in the same cycle he once did. "When the rain falls on your pride," he said finally, "remember the man who stood quietly and still made the storm stop." When Reeves stepped down from the podium, the audience didn't clap right away. They stood, not in salute to the Admiral, but to the man who had once been humbled by another. That night he placed Cole's medal on his desk beside his own collection. His were bright and polished. Cole's was worn and unassuming. Yet somehow it outshone them all. As he turned off the light and looked out toward the sea, Reeves smiled faintly. The rain had begun again, tapping gently against the glass, and for the first time in his long, decorated life, it didn't sound like a storm. It sounded like peace.